my studio in Koganecho, Yokohama, Japan. In 2014, I was accepted as guest artist for Koganecho Bazaar residency program through the network of 98B Collaboratory. So Yamana-san, hello. It was my first time to participate in an international artist residency. So the next slides. For a period of 3 months, I learned a lot by living and practicing among other foreign artists and with the abundant support from the organizers. So thank you, Yamano-san. um, Next, so as you can see, my studio space is transforming as what I'm producing and dealing at the moment. So next slide. Until I got really messy at the end, the third one. So next slide, slide 8. So aside from the idea of presenting work in progress, reflections of becoming and having to adapt, I came across this particular slide in Antarix's presentation about Genba Shugi or on vacationism. And it would be my guiding idea on the next phase of my art practice. So for me, it meant being present in the location. So in 2016, I was employed as a part-time painting instructor on a leisure establishment offering painting sessions. I worked along with fellow visual artist Sidney Valdez. So we guide and instruct guests to duplicate a painting they would select from our gallery, Sip and Go gallery. So next slide. So this has become our studio. So we make exhibition pieces also in this studio. But it was a year, it was a series of negotiations about time, money, social classes, and privileges, among other things concerning art and labor. It was my first time to be an employee, and I think Sidney Valdez I mean, I'm lucky to have Sidney Valdez along with us to deal with the management and orient us with our rights as employees, stuff like that. Next slide. And in 2018, I held my first open studio titled Fuck Bad Luck through the generosity of Nantes Santa Maria. So it was organized to sell works to fund my upcoming projects. For a couple of weeks, it felt like opening a shop, cleaning every tile, hide my beddings, and entertain guests, which are mostly friends. I felt very supported, and um, it I did sell a number of pieces, mostly with friends and other artists, and I think it was empowering for me and helped me figure out or define my market, my primary market, because selling works is one of my primary source of income. Well, that time. So next, so I was able to afford to set up a studio again after that with the sales of the artworks. But for the next year, which is 2019, I had to make studios elsewhere. So next slide. The first studio that we set up was at the second floor of Pablo Post Gallery, Cubao, with Catalina Africa and Tanya Villanueva. We used the second floor to have a common place to do activities together and share our work as Maharlika to visitors and friends. So, yan. Next slide, Jerome. Thanks. Yan. I had a residency in Taitung, southeast of Taiwan, where we learned about indigenous way of living of the Amis people and Taiwan people and our connection to Austronesian race. Next slide. A 3-month research on hand-woven textile industry in Kalibo Clan, where I collaborated with Jeff Handicrafts and Tenya Industry for an exhibition organized by the Fashion Revolution Philippines. And last in December 2019 is in San Pagita projects. I had a solo presentation titled Unfinished Arrangements, and it was an opportunity for me to because it's just that impossible to have in Santa Rosa, Laguna. We discuss our own practices and stressing on logistical concerns and market concerns. So, yeah. Jerome, can you go to the next slide? Yeah, and this is unfinished arrangements in Sampaguita projects. The next slide would focus on the time during the pandemic. Next slide, please. So I stayed in this studio for a year, and it made me question about my own art production, like what will I produce, as well as participation in exhibition making, stressing. Para it's harder to go to Manila because of the lockdown and the cost. So there was an opportunity for me to have another residency. Can we go on the next slide? Earlier this year, I was fortunate to experience Merging Islands, the serfdom of San Juan La Union. So they gathered a mix of artists, writers, and musicians. C&D Reed, Veronica Lazo, Rica Camacho, King Puentes Pina, and Ana Canlas, Archie Oclos with Charles Salazar and Dennis Bato. So the theme for the first season is the word shelter. So next slide. The idea of Emerging Islands is to provide a shared studio space for people to commune, and it was helpful harboring human connections, which I think was very helpful in discussing ideas and just to have, well, a normal interaction, community interactions. So next slide. After an eventful 3 months in La Union and catching up with commitments in exhibitions made prior to the residency, I wasn't able to get back to the studio as I and the studio but it seems chaotic at the time. I mean, personal and stuff. So next slide. Ayan, sa bahay. It's our house, painting of our house. So next slide. So it was just after a month when I tried journaling my experience in La Union from February to May to debrief. And it made me zoom in on the idea of locality, of what would be the role of artists in the local communities since the pandemic happened. The title of the journal was Cultivating a Garden, which I also used as the primer for my ongoing residency in absence for MST10 Performative Arts Festival based in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. Cultivating a Garden is an endeavor to propagate and support creative projects within the locality of our neighborhood, starting at Santa Rosa, Laguna, and nearby towns like Cabuyao, Binyan, San Pedro, and the larger communities we serve in our society, which I refer to as the art world na I get from Cantabreras. Artist as Citizen, Art World as Nation, one of her works. So, informed by relationships with social circles, this will feature engagements with local industries and artistic practices that are present in Santa Rosa, Laguna, and through cultural workers who by themselves have created specific units of organizing creative work. So next slide. So this August, I was able to reorganize and make more space in my own studio. It's an ongoing unfinished ongoing arrangements of stuff and spaces. With the current trajectory of my practice from art production to organization and management, I also ask myself what to make of my own studio space. For now, it is my office, a space of my own chaos, then peace, my sanctuary. How will this space function for the rest of my residency and practice, given the possibility of this pandemic extend for a couple of years more? As my own shell
Sus, nawala ka.
listening, and I'll give back the microphone to Mayumi to introduce the next artist.
Okay, thank you very much, Zeus. Later we'll have a lot of time to talk. Okay, so now I would like to invite, we have actually two guest artists today with whom we'll be talking about what is studio, moderated by Zeus. So first, I would like to invite Fuyuka to give, again, as a quick presentation to introduce her practice. Fuyuka was born and based in Hokkaido, Japan. As research, she travels around the local area and interweaves her experiences with local history and culture in her work. Her recent work involves touring with audiences as well as performing outdoors, which both reflects her research process. She has often focused on the subject of Hokkaido, and in recent years, she has also developed works relating to the Second World War in Asia. So everyone help me welcome Fuyuka.
So thank you for introducing Mayumi-san. I'm Fuyuka Shindo from Hokkaido, and I just briefly quick introduce my past works and what I think about. Hold on, this is so. And so this is the map where is Hokkaido and where I'm from, Sapporo here. So okay, so this is this is Japan, and I can't pick the Okinawa, but this is Japan, and here is Hokkaido, it's north part. And this is surrounded by Russia nearly. So kind of the place Mayumi-san told my work a lot related to Hokkaido. So because because I feel always Hokkaido has the distance from various things. For example, culture, history, and custom from Japan, like a stereotype of Japan, it's a bit different. And also art, it is distance from some common or center of art, I guess. So this distance or gap give me sometimes frustrating, and also sometimes give me a freedom. So distance or gap is the key of my activity. I think so. Yeah, okay. And I just go to next example. Hold on. Yes. So I had a question. So what Hokkaido is, because it's kind of an edge of something in the center. So not a lot of people explain where I am. So I start to look at Hokkaido and the neighbor region. So like north of Honshu, that's the last one I showed, north of Honshu around here. And also the Sakhalin Island here. Oh, can I see that's around here? this is now Russian territory, but before it was, some part was Japan. So then, okay. So especially I research about traditional handicrafts around this region because I doubt the political borders and wanted to see the different perspectives. So this is one example of my work. I made a fictional ethnology collection from my research of traditional handicrafts. So this is the one example. And the next one. Okay. But I think, okay, I try introduce this one as well. The time of modernization in Japan, Japan became the country as Meiji Japan and started diplomatic exchange between the West countries. So this was a big change of Japan as well as Hokkaido. So this picture showed that history about that history of the modernization of Hokkaido. So Hokkaido was colonized by that time by Meiji Japan, which is end of 19th century. So, but in general, we don't use the word colonized, but we use development because it's still kind of we don't confront that history, I guess. And so one thing, Meiji, the government invited Western advisors to develop Hokkaido. I can see this big influence nowadays in Hokkaido still, like agriculture and food culture. It's a lot Western kind of influences to the, so if I go to drive and I can see a lot of vegetable fields, that's not all from Western kind of vegetables, for example. So, and another thing, okay. So, and also that time, many migrants moved in Hokkaido from all over Japan. So my family also moved around this time from mainland. But interesting thing is half of my family, I knew where they come from, but half of them, I don't know where they come from in mainland. And I don't know what they did before come to here. So that's the kind of a lot of people like that, I guess. So it's kind of a reset their family history and they start here at that moment. So then, so I have to tell, before the Meiji period, Hokkaido was the place of great nature and indigenous Ainu people live in. And the Ainu people was very different culture and history from Japan. So, but Meiji, the government made Ainu people be a part of Japanese. So it includes systematic discrimination to them. So it is difficult to talk about Ainu issues still nowadays. So that's the one I just briefly introduce my local and my work. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Fuyuka. There were very interesting ideas that we hope to address later in the discussions moderated by Zeus. Okay, so next I would like to call Jazel, and Jazel's sensibility as a documentary filmmaker pervades her cross-disciplinary practice that encompasses collage, photography, video, sound, and performance. As alternative repositions of the traces and keepsakes she collects throughout her journeys, she sets the scene for these materials in an immaterial mementos to unfold, unravel, and illumine, all in directional fashion, whether as vivisections of her most pervasive proclivities or as cartographic abstractions of her motions and emotions. Her intermedia art ultimately serves as a parallel universe wherein she negotiates and navigates through ambiguity, complexity, and memory at her own pace and according to her own terms. Okay, welcome, Jazel.
Hello, good afternoon. So I'm Jazel Kristin, and I'm talking to you now live from Casa San Miguel. So it's a center for the arts in San Antonio, Zambales. It's like a 5-hour drive from Manila, depending on the traffic, because as Filipinos, that's how we measure the distance. So anyway, since 2012, I've been working with the people of San Antonio, at first by giving a docu-film workshop for students here. And since then, I also collaborated with the Pundakit Virtuosi. They are the resident string ensemble and other resident artists. So for the past 9 years, Casa San Miguel has been a refuge and an extension of my studio. So in line with my continuing artist residency here, I would like to talk a bit about my project, Josa, or goddess in English. Can we show the next slide? So this is my studio here in Casa San Miguel. And then next slide, please. So I believe as artists, we are also storytellers. So in every story, there's a beginning, a middle, and an ending. And Josa is a layered story that contains multiple points of entry. So we can start at the very beginning in the pre-Hispanic folk tale about the Virgin Mary, or Ina sa Batuhan, or Woman of the Rocks, which inspired this project. Or we can go straight in the workshop to be done with mothers from the local community and the devotees of the Virgin Mary. Next slide. Yeah, Josa means goddess in English. So in the workshop, people will be asked to create milagros. Milagros, which means miracles in both Filipino and Spanish. So they will create miracles using their own hands. At the midpoint of Josa, we can join in as a spectator in the procession or parade to be participated in by the mothers, with accompanying music by the Pundakit Virtuosi of Casa San Miguel. And then there will be the Republic Band, which is the local marching band here in San Antonio. So it will be a celebration of the mothers of the community, as well as Thanksgiving for the Virgin. Or, next slide, we can perhaps take a look at the artworks. So there will be a site-specific installation that will remain for one day and will be a community shrine of sorts, which will include the milagros they created during the workshop, along with 3 of my artworks. So this is part of my 2018 exhibition, Ego Altar, that was made and shown here in Casa San Miguel. So if you look at it closely, the collage on wood artworks are composed of images of food arranged to depict portraits which resemble icons of saints or the Virgin. So these artworks will be given to 3 mothers whom I have interviewed and filmed. So these are mothers of varying generations and states of life. So the giving away of my art is a continuation of my project called Free Art for Free. Next slide. So Free Art for Free, it's every full moon and new moon, what I do is I leave my artworks in public spaces for people to retrieve. It is created as a way to give back and share how art was able to be my source of strength and survival. Like in my past exhibitions, Parallel Universe in 2010 and Multiverse in 2014. Next slide. So this is Free Art for Free. And then this is Parallel Universe in 2010 and 2014. It is where I brought my artworks on the streets of Manila and the streets of Paris. For Parallel Universe in 2010, my first exhibit in France. Next slide. I wanted my fellow men to see these works. So I thought like, okay, if they can't come to France, my art will come to them. So my intention is to blur the line between two worlds, merging street and private space, the outside and the inside. So Josa is a product of my concerns and anxieties during the pandemic and lockdowns and my long-term investigations on how to bring art to people outside the four walls of a gallery or exhibition space. Okay, you can go back to my face now, Jerome. All right, thank you, Jerome. So I asked myself, nakakain ba ang art? Can you eat art? Can it sustain you? So this question somehow resonated with the scene in the folk tale where the husband was tasked to look for food and instead brought home the wooden statue of the Virgin Mary. As an artist, I want to break down the barriers of my studio practice, but also invite these women to go out of their spaces where they were relegated to. And as a woman, I want to gather and give, to share and learn from these strong women. So yun, mga Diyosa, let's celebrate. That's it.
Okay. Thank you, Jazel. Thank you very much. Okay, so from here, I would like to pass the microphone to Zeus for the discussions.
Yes. So, can I ask Jerome to start screen sharing the Jamboard? In this part of the stopover, I would ask participation from the audience by interacting through the Jamboard that we prepared for session. So I will forward to you all the link of the Jamboard. So this part of the stopover. So yeah, I forwarded the link of the chat and that everybody can visit. And I would like to ask Mark and Mayumi of why they think zooming into deep, how is it been visiting the artist studio or knowing about the artist's practice, studio practice? Mark or Mayumi? Because I had the knowledge that during the briefing also you
Choppy
it was one of the studio visits.
Okay, sorry, I think I don't know if I got the question from Zeus, but I think he was inviting Lord Nadito to talk about the concept behind this stopover series. Is that right?
Yeah, and also about asking the artists to present an image or a detail of the studio. Parang, because I kind of remember the flex game. Parang, is it an extension of that to tell something about the studio practice or something about the studio?
So yeah, just to give you quick background of how we came up with this idea of virtual studio visit. And most of you are here in the Philippines, so you know the situation, but it's very difficult for us to now visit each other. And before pandemic, you know, we would always host dinner in our place, and we also go visit our friends and share, you know, meals, and that often happened in our studios. So we miss this kind of experience of visiting and sharing, not just looking at artworks in the gallery, but talking about things in life that surrounds artistic practice and also our practice as culture workers. So that was the idea behind these studio visits. And the first two rounds of studio visits, Lord Nadito, Jerome, I, and Mark moderated the talks. And for that, we asked the artists to show their studios by showing the details of their studios, not the entire space, but instead show us what would be an interesting object to talk about, and show and tell their practice and also life during the pandemic. So yeah.
Thanks for Mayumi for sharing that para how this all started. And before we proceed with Fuyuka and Jazel, the details of the studio, like zooming in, I would like to just explain to the audience the Jamboard tools. Sige, can we go on the next slide, Jerome? Thanks. So this slide, you can see a color. The title of the name of the color from Davis, Sun and Rain, is Clear Promise. So this is just an introduction of how we're going to utilize the Jamboard for this session. Now you can see at the left, there are tools like the pen, the eraser, cursor, sticky notes, photos, shapes, text, and the laser. Yeah. So I would like everybody because what will happen is when we're going to have a conversation with the artists, and of course during the conversation there might be some questions or thoughts or just anything. Now I will invite you to input on the Jamboard. So for example, what is can I ask everybody here and just try it out? What is your promise? Promise to self. So ayan. Maybe just to try out the Jamboard, if you're willing to participate. I mean, you can be anonymous. We can all try try doing entries of our promises. It could be for the self or for others or for anything. Just to have by the way, the Jamboard slides, it will be some form of documentation at the end of the session. And on the next slides, if since time is limited, we can all go back to the artists, and Luna Dito and myself can go back to the Jamboard to try to do correspondence, to answer the questions or to maybe fill in more details that you want to know more about the artists. So can I ask everybody if they're willing to input some? I know we have a lot, but some of our promises before we proceed to just so we know if it's working. I will try. Follow the heart. Be honest. I'll put one more. So now we can see that it's working, and we can all go back to the Jamboard to the second slide, but maybe we can proceed to Fuyuka. So ayan. So we asked the artist to send in a photograph they want to share about their studio live practice and studio or studio setup. So Fuyuka sent this, and I assume this is your studio mates. So Fuyuka, can you tell us about the photo?
Okay. Yes, this is in front of my studio door. And I took this one, was kind of rare gathering under the pandemic. So I thought, so I don't introduce each of them, but that's kind of a, for me, you know, like I can see the individual artists here, but not, you know, be together. So that's the reason I just sent this one. So yeah, that's just, is it okay?
Yeah, it's fine, it's fine. So I would like to ask, since you're working with the history of Hokkaido, since you're working with the history of Hokkaido, how do other artists get involved in your research? Are they part of the process of getting narratives, or how you go about the process of your project?
Oh, that's my project. It's not related to this photo, is it? Okay. Just
Yeah,
my.
it's fine. It's just like a general question of like
Oh, okay.
how you.
I initially start more interview or maybe interaction between local people. For example, I visited some Ainu people to kind of try to run some traditional crafts or something, but these days or afterwards, and then I kind of do the more, that moment I kind of more involved to the craft type of work. I did more, but I found it is difficult to keep doing because the involvement of other people is how I can say, because art is sometimes very demanding to the to do the people to make involved, I guess. So then because so it means that I have so that's the reason, one of the reason I kind of away from interview or involvement with people. So then I research just more, travel a lot. I visit some places, but not a lot of people involved. I just go to the historic site, for example, and read books. And if I really need to speak with somebody particular, I start interview or maybe exchange. So that's the way now I'm doing. Is that?
Yeah. It's interesting then for me to, because I work with, I think one of the commonality that all of us, the three of us, Jazel, you, and even Lola Dito, and most of the artists present here, is working with community. With the people in the community. And I find it, it's a struggle also to kumbaga, interact with other people because of the differences and the language itself. So, but can you share with us, because I think it's crucial now, like how to connect to people and consider their needs and wants. But can you give us examples of how how do you find it hard to interact with the Ainu people? Because you mentioned earlier that there's still a discrimination towards the indigenous people, and I think parang
Yeah, it's, I think, for example, like cultural appropriation is the one I think a lot of people think about, kind of concern about. That's the one part. And also, this is my logo. So I feel like once I have a connection with some people, it's like they always neighbors. Like when I go to residency for a couple of months away from Japan, for example, this is kind of a 3 months of kind of privilege. Like I can research, I can speak with people, I do my work. So because it's the purpose to do, so then I back to home. So that's a kind of 3 months of a dream or something. But when I research here, I am not, if I finish my project, people still there, it's kind of a continuous relation there, I guess. So that's the more I feel kind of, I don't want to pick up some information or useful something for my art from people, for example, I'm people or forever the people. So that's kind of exchange, more, it's more involvement, it's deeper, I feel, when I do the research or project here. So that's the reason I try to be careful, because sometimes, people show me, how can I say, I see people uncomfortable to talk about their own, it's very important to build a trust or something.
Yes, of course.
So that's the kind of behind it, I guess. I mean.
So with the people you interact with, I'm curious how you keep relationship with them.
With me, you mean?
You and the people that you interview or you interact, but the people you gain like develop trust with.
Okay. So so sometimes it goes well, like for example, now I'm doing a project in some rural town. So there's a kind of a small art center there, and the person who runs the place, kind of I knew her 10 years or so, maybe more than 10 years. So that's kind of more comfortable to relate together, and I feel ready to project with her.
Yeah.
So because we knew each other, then we knew we can do something worse, I guess. But before, I'm not really went well was, for example, I go to some place for the Ainu people who do the kind of their traditional crafts. And at first, I didn't think about it can be art or not. Just I'm curious about. So that, but afterwards, I get really interesting. Then I thought it's maybe became art for me. So that's the kind of border or point to kind of our relation is not really good, went well. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's the kind of two example, my experience.
I want to go to the questions on the Jamboard. Can you see? But yeah, maybe I can just ask the question. Maybe we can answer one of the questions in the Jamboard. You select.
Okay. How do
what is
you
a studio for you? Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. How do you interact with other local artists? Okay, so I go this one. How do you interact with other local artists? It means it's very kind of small community here. So I knew most of artists and people who involved, I guess. So so I meet people at the openings, for example, or maybe do the exhibition in local, and we can be together like in the group show. So that's kind of in general, but I find I'm not sure other places in Japan, but compared to Tokyo, when I was, for example, in Sapporo, kind of people keep the distance, not really deep commitment. I don't think compared to Tokyo. When I go to Tokyo, people more knew each other, or like people kind of knew secret each other like that. You know what I mean? But I think this for me here, kind of people keep the distance, and I feel like clean.
But
Like, yeah.
yeah, you mentioned before na your studio is located in a way like a shared studio spaces, right?
Yeah.
Do they know of your project, of what you're trying to do with the history of Hokkaido? And do some artists kumbaga wanted to not be involved or try to parang support what you do? Do you have that kind of response from the other local artists in Hokkaido?
Oh, that's the one thing I'm now concerned. For example, I can tell couple of things about that.
Go ahead.
Right. One is, no, people, for example, in my studio, people do different things, you know. For example, I'm project-based, kind of related to the history, but some people painter, like abstract. So some people other things for the interest. But so it's kind of we don't interact each other so much in terms of the work itself.
Production.
But I think we share the art in Hokkaido, or Hokkaido is I told at the first, that's kind of the distance from the center, or something not share the common or something. That's feeling I think people share here. So we kind of, for example, maybe it's too much, but I think, for example, here in local, it's not very good place to do art, I guess, because that's the limited opportunity, and the kind of local art scene is kind of small. So people probably knew, and also what is the art here can do. So that's kind of a thing I think people see, share that there is a problem. So that's the one thing, I guess. And for example, for another thing, I kind of deal with Hokkaido, right? So if I speak about Hokkaido, the kind of difficulty or the history, or that's kind of I can share the sense or feeling. For example, issue are about Ainu people, for example. So, but if I go to Tokyo, I think I can't share that. I have to really explain what's going on here, but normally people don't understand about it. So that's a kind of difference here, local and away from here.
But in Hokkaido, being the art community in Hokkaido is small, and I think that what you're doing is kind of like a bridge, because you mentioned earlier na the handicraft, the craft work that the Ainu people do. At first, you didn't see it as art, but then eventually, parang you're seeing that na it is art. It's their art. Parang I think this project that you're doing tries to kumbaga widen the understanding of people what art is. But I'm curious on how do you share this idea that what the craft work that the Ainu people do is also art, because I also see that na parang it's part of their everyday life, it's part of their tradition and culture. Um, do you have these kinds of conversations with the Ainu people, or you just keep it to yourself and among the local artists in your studio?
Mm, mm.
And
I
how do they react? How do they respond?
um so I think I know craft is also art, but it's distinction between that's craft and art what I'm involved. So, but both of them, for example, we can see in a special exhibition in local museum, for example. But it's not combined; it's separated. You know, it's as the. So that's the situation, and so then I think it's if I know people or anybody in local not really involved with art, if they see the art like contemporary art, some people probably get interesting, but some people not understand, I guess. So that's probably the anywhere the same. So, but I kind of really but if I do, when I do the art here, the audience, mostly people who are not involved art. So that's also here is the kind of the thing to think about who would be the witness of the art.
I think parang we've come to the time limit of 20 minutes, but there's so many things to there's so many questions then also.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you also for Yuka. There are questions here na maybe we can go back after the stopover session. And thank you everybody for posting your questions. There's so much to talk about. The Ainu art, craft work, and cultural appropriation. I think it's a very it's a topic na parang should be discussed more, thinking of the indigenous people and their importance, the value of their contribution, diba? So thank you Fuyuka, Shindo, for sharing with us Hokkaido and your practice and your project. Thank you. So now we go to Jazel. The next slide. So hello Jazel. Josa and Jazel. This is we based on your presentation earlier, parang this dog, one of the photo that you share here is one of the milagros. So can you why is parang why is it a dog? Parang ako, that's my question. Hello. Okay. This is a product of the workshop, diba? Who did this, and why? What did the creator told everybody about the dog?
So this is PB. His name is PB, or Peanut Butter. He's the resident mascot of Casa San Miguel. So actually, the workshop hasn't happened yet. It will take place by the end of October. So while we are here during my I'm on my artist residency now in Casa. There was we had a COVID scare here, and so we were in quarantine. And so I asked my fellow residents to make their own milagros on what they are thankful for this pandemic. And so I was the one who made that milagros.
Okay.
So somebody gave me parang an icon of female icon, and then the other one gave me milagros of a violin, And me, what I am grateful for during this pandemic is PB. So this is PB. PB, because I feel that I want to see things like the way he does. Because when he first arrived here in Casa, he was exploring the space. Tapos he goes off to the forest and then he plays with the cows and then he eats chicken poop. And so it's like as he was growing up, eventually he wanted to explore. So he goes out of the street and go to the community. And then one time he would escape and then somebody from the community would go back here to Casa to return him. So I feel like in a way, he's like bridging the gap between Casa San Miguel and the community. So I feel like he's
Yeah.
like perfect symbol for that.
Yeah, I'm seeing na parang with this Milagros of PB, kumbaga he's like the guardian, like a custodian,
Yes.
ganyan. But
Mm,
thinking of the workshop then, and since you'll be
mm,
working closely with the community,
mm.
and with the COVID, syempre, I mean, in your project, it's important to interact with the local.
Yes.
So, of course, parang we don't know yet like how. I mean, it's very uncertain what will happen in the next week or in the next month. Pero as an organizer, parang how are you going about it? Conducting the workshop involving the physical participation of the people, of the locals.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, can you tell us like how are you going on with it, like with the process that you planning to proceed?
So for now, I have interviewed three mothers for this project. Um, but these are three mothers that I personally know. So, like one mother is my former student when I gave a workshop here. So she's like 20 years old. And then another mother I interviewed um, is the wife of the guy who I collaborated with, who made the wooden board for my collage. And then the other mother is our resident mother here in Casa San Miguel. She's the one who cooks for us and prepares our food. So because I know them personally, it's easier to connect with them. So I just visit them in their homes and interview them there. For the other mothers, for the workshop, I am in contact with a local liaison. So we have this who is also my former student here, who is helping me meet other mothers. So I haven't met all of them yet, but because now I with the devotees, I also interviewed devotees of the Virgin Mary. So I did the interviews online because of the
Mm.
pandemic. It's difficult to do a face-to-face interview with the crowd, with groups of people. So I sent out questionnaires or I interviewed them online and to do the background research for my story. And so, but for the workshop itself, we will need to follow the protocol based from the city government, the mayor from the mayor's office. So we are only allowed to have like 10 participants, for example, and practice social distancing. So that's what we're going to do. And then we will also have a procession, a march on the
Yeah.
street. So that would be the resident string ensemble, the Pundaket Bertosi. So we are all staying here in Casa. So we will do the marching would be made by the musicians, but the others from their homes can take a look and watch the procession. But so they don't have we don't have to make crowd in the make create a big crowd on the street. But I think it would be the first time also the that there will be some sort of celebration here in the community. So I feel that we all deserve this, like in a way, like it's difficult to celebrate, to gather, to get together this time. But you know, we try as artists, we try to find ways to to bridge that gap somehow, like you know, from their homes they can watch, and all of this will be part of a film, will be made into a film, a documentary. So those who cannot participate in the workshop and the march, they can watch it online.
Mm. Um, can we look at some of the questions on the slide?
So
Do
Zeus,
you plan?
can you yes, choose the
Uh,
question because I cannot I
um,
cannot see it. It's
do
too
you
small
plan to
for
keep?
me.
So this is one. Do you plan to keep the relationship with the local communities around Casa after your residency?
Okay. Oh, of course. I've been here like since 2012, and you see, like, I'm still connected with the community here. And so, as much as I can, if I can include them in my projects, yes, the idea is for this to continue and not just stop during the project. So yes, I still plan to continue this connection with the community.
Yeah, since you're going back
Does
and
that answer
forth.
the question?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, diba, you
Yes,
mentioned nga na
yes.
you go back and forth to Manila and Casa San Miguel and parang
Yeah,
you were there since what year?
2012.
2012. So parang and you also teach ba in Casa San Miguel? Parang I'm just wondering how your relationship with the community grows, and how parang yun nga since I visited there once, and then
Yes,
you
yes,
toured us, and then the people working in Casa San Miguel also are the locals then, di ba? Parang
yes,
they
exactly.
and the students also. But yun nga, how did the community grew from 2012 until present, and how do you think the relationship got affected with the pandemic? I mean, aside from like meeting face to
Mm-mm,
face and stuff, but
mm-mm.
how did it kumbaga, yun nga, how
So
did
as I mentioned earlier, so in 2012, I gave a documentary workshop for the students here. And then, in a way also, this Pondakit Virtuosi, they are part of the community as well. And so I'm continuing to collaborate with all of them. And so, like, for example, my student in 2012 is now my local liaison to the community. Or my student before is now the mother that I'm going to give my artwork to,
wow.
and I'm now interviewing. And so the mother who took care of us and still taking care of us now, who's working here in Casa San Miguel, she's part of this project as well. So it's like the connection, and I think it will forever be here as long as I get to keep to return here and
Yeah,
be.
yeah,
So
I
the
understand. Sorry, go.
go continue go.
And I understand na the project is based on close relationships then.
Yes.
And since it's a project, I wonder like, and this is what you're doing is a residency,
Hmm.
and the outputs or parang the process involved in your project with the documentation interview, and then there
Hmm.
will be a film, a procession, ganyan.
Yeah.
Are people compensated, or parang it's supported by some, how do you go about the cost of all this? I'm just interested in that aspect of project making kasi since the pandemic nga, one of my
Mm-mm.
concerns is kumbaga how to have work
Mm-mm.
just in order to
Exactly.
survive, like just to fill in the basic needs of the everyday. So
Mm-mm.
how do you go about it, and with the collaborators or the people that you interview, or
Mm-mm. So for me, I'm very lucky. Like during this pandemic, to have Casa San Miguel who gave this project to us, the resident artists here. So we have sponsors, co-sponsors. So we have a budget, and then we work around that budget to make this happen. And so for the people, the local people that I hired who are part of the group, they will be compensated. But for the others, for example, I will give my artwork to them so that
mm,
in a way like my gift to them. So because yeah, it's very difficult now with financial help and all that. So that's why big institutions, art institutions, are like very important in helping us artists to make this project, community art project, happen. And so yeah, so that's so they are being compensated, and they are going to be given the artworks as well, some of the models. But yeah, but I cannot discuss exactly like the other
Yeah.
financial aspects of the project, but basically we have a like a
Yeah.
grant that you work on, work around that budget.
Yeah, but I think it's not that it is impossible to do this kind of project without grants or financial support. Pero I just understand also na it involves a lot of costs then. Even
Yes, of
though
course.
you're really living in the community, and of course the kumbaga the comfort then and of knowing the people throughout the years, parang people are just like willing to do things, diba?
Yeah, yeah.
For a common goal or ano.
Yeah, so it's also sort of
But
like an
yeah,
exchange.
and
Exchange.
compensation could be of any form,
Yes,
diba?
yes, not
So
it's not only financially. Yeah, it can be like an
yeah,
exchange of talents and like that.
yeah. I'll go again. I'll go again in some of the questions. Um, since you've been going back and forth to Casa San Miguel, so this is like, of course, this is not your first community project. As you mentioned earlier, na in this specific project that you're doing now, some of the projects from your previous visits, parang is, kumbaga, still is like ongoing or
Yes, yes,
integrated in
yes.
this one.
Yeah,
So,
continuation.
yeah, what do you think? One of the question here is, what is a good residency? Is it the studio, the context of the place, people, etc.? So, what is a good residency basically for you, Jason?
For me, it's like when they give you freedom, give you freedom to do what you think is good, and to be given that voice to tell a story. A good residency is you are given space and support, and also because this is a residency, you get to connect and interact with fellow artists, not necessarily just visual artists. So I get to interact with researchers or writers, photographers, dancers. So good residency for me has space to let you be, um, um, good exchange and creatives. Also here, being close to nature, I think that's so important, especially now this pandemic. Like when I was in Manila, you just have the four walls of your room, and then being here, we have the forest, we have the sea, so we have this rituals like during sunset, you go and watch the sunset in the beach, which was like 10 minutes walk from here, and you get to see other locals from here. And then sometimes you would walk and they would call you like, Ma'am Jazel, or, like, because they know you know them. And also you have we have the forest here, we have the trees, and it's like a healing place where you get to be free. So I think that's for me an important, good residency.
Yeah. There's another entry in the Jamboard na how did the people in the streets react when brought out and showed them your artwork? It was very brave of you. I can imagine myself doing a similar thing. Yeah, I imagine kasi since Casa San Miguel's program, Casa San Miguel has been part of the communities since I'm not sure when. Since
Uh,
when? 2000.
sorry, sir, Coke. I don't like maybe 20 years already, maybe, or
Uh,
18 to 20 years. They've been here since, yeah, that long. I'm not sure like how
and
long.
I assumed
Yeah.
I assume the involvement of Casa San Miguel opened the local residents. Kumbaga, Casa San Miguel is one of the things one of the uh, institutions that introduce art to the people. So
Yes, yes,
parang
yes, yes.
going back to the question na how do the people react to you when you bring out your work to the public and talk to them, like how can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so I think that question is also connected to what I did in 2010. So I brought the
Mm.
artwork in the streets of Manila and then in Paris. So that was so interesting because uh, I just walked and then brought outside my artwork on the street, and I was just walking. And here in Manila, and I mean in Manila, a lot of strangers just started walking up to me and then looking at my artwork, asking like, "Oh, what is that?" Like that. It's so nice. Like the interaction was so organic and so natural for them, you know. And then I did the same thing in Paris, and of course, you know, like being Europeans and like the Center for Art and all that, like they were cold, like they were just walking past me, like they didn't care, like just looking at me like that, and I'm just standing there on the street. Some did talk to me, but you know the feeling like so different. You feel the difference with the warmth of the Filipinos as opposed to the sorry to the Europeans, but you know like bit cold, like what's that? What are you doing like that? And yeah, the exchange in the streets in Manila was so I enjoyed that very much. So yeah, that was interesting. Also, the way they reacted to the artwork, like they weren't shy at all. So that was really really nice.
Well, one of the things I admire about Jazel's practice is parang how she commits fully, physically, mentally, and spiritually to her works.
Spiritually.
And I think that's how she was able to do this kind of decisions na to subject herself in the process of art making. So um is there anything you want to share?
Me? Maybe
Because
we can have
I'm looking at we can have more of the
with Fuyuka.
discussion.
Yeah.
Pero tatat na
Okay,
lang.
last. Sige.
Uh, one last, Jason, before we proceed with the who communities outside Manila.
Okay, Okloy.
How similar, different is the experience creating work in Manila and in Zambales? Narinig mo ba?
Yes, yes. What's the difference of creating art in Manila and Zambales? Correct?
Correct.
Correct. Okloy. So that's the
Yeah.
question, right? So the difference. Um, so with I mentioned about free art for free. So I did that in Manila. I brought my artworks in the streets of my neighborhood in Manila, in Quezon City, and then I continued doing that here in Zambales. So difference of creating art. Of course, here you have the nature. Sobrang, it's so nice to be able to work here. And because in my place in Quezon City, I am by myself. I don't get to talk to anyone else. So I'm just there creating my art in my room. And here you get to be with other creative souls, and so there's an exchange. And then you can easily go to see the sea, or stay under the trees, or swim in the river. And so of course there's a difference, and it affects how you create art. So when you're in the city, you only get to think about yourself. And when you're here in this big space, you get to think about how your art affects the community. And so I think that's the difference. Okloy?
Sorry,
Thank you.
Thank you. Sana wala kang suggest, but I'm here. I'm back, and maybe we can, if it's okay, for Fuyuka and Luna Dito to participate in the last slide. And thank you everybody for there are a lot of questions posted on each artist's individual slides, but maybe here in the open lot we can discuss like your thoughts, Fuyuka and Jazel, on each other's practices. Kasi I feel like what we're doing at the present just doesn't landscape than the confines of our studio spaces. So in this with this, how do you, what does the studio's purpose in this kind of project when it's more of like field work and human interaction than solitary practice? So can Fuyuka and Jazel share what they think about this aspect of these projects?
Good. Should I go first or Fuyuka? Fuyuka.
Sige, Jazel, if you can go first.
So the like the importance of having a physical space, a studio, and how does it affect our?
Yeah, because the projects
Yeah, what we're
basically
working on now.
involves other people and
Mhm.
yeah, like field work. So this what do you think is the purpose of the studio in that
Mhm.
sense?
I think the studio is like your base, like home base. So for me, ever since I don't really have like a permanent space. I can be anywhere and I can still create art. It doesn't have to be like a permanent physical space. But for me, the whole of Casa is my studio. And we have also what we call here our open studio where we just bring our banigs, our mat, and go in the forest and stay under the trees. So that's still your studio. So I think it's like a nest of sort where you can let your thoughts and your concept simmer, and then that's what, after letting it simmer, then you go out and do your thing. I don't know if that's clear. Sorry.
So,
Go Fuyuka.
how about you, Fuyuka? How do you feel? What does the studio serve your project?
Yeah. For me, like this is I do some work like it is the room for me, like office. And sometimes I can do something, but it's more is this studio is in a group of people together. So I think that's the interaction between artists or some organizations, art organizations. So that's really kind of, for me, it's good to, talk about art or whatever. And also it's kind of, for example, because here I'm kind of project-based, but some people are painters, some people sculptor, and different generations as well, like 20s to 60s. That's also I'm interesting to talk with other people. And so that's, I kind of know the attitude, different attitude towards art. People are very serious to work with, but different way as well. Like some people are full-time artists, sometimes some people are working full-time and do the artwork as well. So that's, all different way to continue art. So that's really impressive for me. So yeah.
Yeah, I wonder, since having this kind of work, I mean, the scope of it involves people and influence your decisions. Like, is there some kind of kumbaga ganung or on how they from other people, like how they feel, or
Choppy Zeus. I didn't hear the question.
Zeus? Hello? Hello? I think we lost Zeus for so his connection is not that stable, but we can continue the discussion if you have some question. I think Zeus is trying to say about the idea of the interaction within the studio, and maybe we can continue the discussion by asking some question. You can just type maybe on the chat box. Hello.
Sorry, I'm back. My internet is Pero for the audience, do you have any particular question on to Fuyuka or Jazel? We see the questions on the Jamboard. Here's one. Jason, Jason Fuyuka, what inspired you to work with communities or involve other people, and how does it relate to your individual outputs also? I'm curious as well.
I think Zeus is again having a hard time, but the question is,
Zeus, we
what
love you.
inspired you?
Zeus, we love you.
Which one? Alin ba? Which one is the question?
I think this one, what inspired you to work with communities?
Inspired you. Yeah. Okay. So
maybe I go first.
yes, sure. Yeah.
Okay, I feel I kind of not really work with community, but involve other people. So this is because as an artist, how can I say, I don't want to be a center of the project. So that's the one, to kind of people's involvement is more kind of a good, because I think because they are artists sometimes too demanding and to dominate the kind of situation. So that's kind of helped me to, bit away from that. So that's the kind of a feeling.
Thank you, Fuyuka. Jason.
So for me, because I started as a documentary filmmaker, so I'm used to, like, when you tell stories, it's always a collaborative effort. So there are the characters that you interview, there's a director, an editor. So it's always a collaborative process for me. But then at that time, I was thinking, like, I want to have something on my own. So that's when I started making my own art. So that at least, like, that's mine. This is mine. But then towards the latter part of my career as a director, you cannot, it's you start to look for other people to have to exchange ideas with. And so I went back to that process of storytelling. So it's always good to have this exchange of ideas and also exchange of energies with other fellow creatives or with the community. But like Fuyuka, I haven't always totally worked with the community. So it's also with fellow artists. But for me, always telling a story is always collaboration.
I have a question to Fuyuka and Jay, since both of you kind of like involves stories or interview people, the Ainu people and then the Aitas. Is that like in Zambales? Aitas.
Well, yeah.
Hello.
Zeus is with us in spirit.
Yes.
Just maybe you can type your question. For
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I think Sus is asking about storytelling, about the practice of Jazel and Fuyuka as an important aspect of presenting and maybe research. So we can also slowly end with your stories because of the time is also limited now. So we can ask again Jazel and Fuyuka about what do you mean about how stories are presented, or how do you present stories? What is story for you? If that's, I think, so yeah, I think Sus is trying to ask that about story making, storytelling. So just a quick round to wrapping up this story making. Can start again with Fuyuka, maybe.
It's a bit difficult question how I can tell about storytelling. I think because the kind of my work has a process. It's important. In the research part, it's kind of, there's a timeline, kind of practically. So that's kind of translate to the story. This is the kind of one of the relation with the story and my project. And also that's a story kind of, it's fiction. So it's more easy. Sometimes I kind of deal with the thing that not really very open to the public. So it can use kind of this fiction to kind of for my work, probably. Yeah.
Thank you.
For me, so storytelling is, my background is more on documentary filmmaking. So it's more about reality as opposed to fiction, for example. And so storytelling for me is a way of sharing the reality of the people that I meet. The characters of my that I do in the bigger picture. So it can be about the people I meet during my travel or the people I meet in the community. So there's always that, and then I have a broad question. So for this project, JOSA, for example, I wanted to focus on the mothers, like what they went through, how during this pandemic, how they survive, what are the challenges that they experience, and also what are the miracles that took place during this time. So for me, this project is a way to tell their story, and so I'm just like the writer, the director of their story, to be able to tell it and share their reality to other people. So there.
Thank you, Jason. And I think we are closing our session soon. For the end part, I want to ask Zeus because
Hello.
Zeus is back, and most of his works also about our storytelling. So, and also talks about a lot of his visions, the things that we cannot also see. So, especially in his surroundings in San Pedro or in
Santa Rosa.
Santa Rosa. Yes. So I'm also interested on maybe you can share about the idea of storyteller as an artist or storyteller or as an artist as storyteller.
Yeah. Thanks. I feel like when I started as an artist, as a children's book illustrator, parang it's one of my I think it's one of my strengths as just how to interact with people. But also I in the past just because the stories of the the mystical and the supernatural, parang it's just part of our family's history. That's why maybe um I'm comfortable telling those stories without really offending certain people. Um, but also in the recent, I mean, before now, I used to get stories from other people as well. Um, but it's just now that I come to realize the importance of um, asking people if they're comfortable sharing those to others. Kumbaga, I have this tendency that I get to people get comfortable with me and just tell me stories. And maybe because it's one of the effects of what Cindy Mochizuki, one of the resident artists I am with in Japan, she told me I have a portal on my face. So just it's just like naturally people will be drawn to me and tell me stories and get comfortable with me and share me their life. But recently nga with the pandemic and how to really be carefully establish relationship and trust with others, yun nga, that's why I also ask, how do you, yeah, and consent in storytelling is important. Um, Commended by Tanya. yun nga, it's important to tell them, especially the indigenous people, which are often unheard. That's why I asked Fuyuka and Jazel about the Ainus and the Ayas. Na it's their story. And how do people want to share their stories? Artists as storytellers should consider that most importantly. Yun nga, that's what as Fuyuka mentioned earlier. She doesn't want to be the center of the project. Kumbaga, working with others and other narratives, I think, is parang one way of decentralizing um, our present history, I think. And I think it's, ayun nga, I'm still learning how to go about it. So I think that's what I can share about.
Thank you very much, Zeus, for your portal.
Which is closing and then opening.
Opening. So I think that's really good. It's like there's always time to open up and to close. And it's time for us to close the session for this time. And we can share the next session. Jerome, can you please share the next session? And we will be on our fourth session next October 9. So if you have time, we will have Raut Lumbres and Nes Roque, who is from Philippines but based now in Yokohama, and Jian Yin is based in Ratchaburi in Thailand. So it will be moderated by Jay Pasena. So starting from this session, we invited artists to moderate the session. So to create more decentralized also as an idea of what we talk about. So the stories and then the conversations are coming from different direction. So thank you again for Fuyuka, Jazel, and Zeus, and thank you everyone for staying this afternoon with us, and hope to see you soon.